Okay, ready to go? Okay. Good evening and welcome to Thorold City Council. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'll call for the adoption of the agendas. Councillor Whalen.
By myself, second by Councilor Neal, regular council meeting minutes, May 15, 2018, be hereby adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any items for discussion on these agendas? What are you talking? Sorry.
He read the wrong motion, so Councillor Hanley has adoption of the agendas, and Whalen's the second.
Okay, we'll start that one over again. Adoption of the agendas, it's Councillor Hanley that has that one. I'm sorry. My mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Peel, that the council adopt the agendas as published on May 31st, 2018, and any and all revisions published June 5th, 2018.
Okay, items for discussion. Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried, and I'll move right into my mayor's report, which is brief tonight. On May 16th, FO 18 celebrated the grand opening of its Thorold restaurant in style. We welcome Jenny and Andy to our downtown and wish them success in their new business. Attending that event with me was Councillor Ugolini and Regional Councillor Henry D'Angela. I had the honor of acting as the reviewing officer at the annual ceremonial review for the 128th Thorold Flames Air. It was a wonderful and I was pleased to have been included in the yearly ceremony. I offer my thanks to the cadets and the service they have provided to our community over the years. June is Italian Heritage Month in Canada. On Friday of last week, along with members of Club Capri, the Italian flag was raised at City Hall to celebrate all things Italian and to recognize the contributions the Italians have made towards Canada's diversity and rich culture. On Sunday, June 3rd, I participated in the Royal Canadian Legion's branch's annual Decoration Day. Also in attendance were our MP Van Spadaway, Regional Councillor D'Angela, Councillors Whalen, Neal, and Ugolini. On behalf of Council and our community, I would like to thank the Legion for hosting this ceremony, and more importantly, our veterans. Your service and sacrifice cannot be overlooked or forgotten. For that, we offer our thanks. And that concludes my report. And we do not have a regional council update tonight. I'll call for the adoptions of the minutes. Councillor Whalen.
Let's try this again.
Yeah, we'll try it
Moved
again.
by myself,
I got it right this time.
Councillor Neal, that the regular council meeting minutes of May the 15th, 2018 be hereby adopted.
Thank you. Are there any items for discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. General Committee meeting minutes of May 15, 2008. Councillor Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Neal, that the General Committee meeting minutes of May the 15th, 2018 be hereby adopted.
Thank you. Items for discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Planning and Development Services Public Forum Committee meeting of May 5th, 2018, moved by Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Payon, that the Planning and Development Services Public Forum Committee meeting of May 15th, 2018 be hereby adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any items for discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We did not have any public meetings tonight, nor any civic recognitions. We'll go right into our presentations. First presentation is David Hayworth, Region of Niagara Planning and Development Services, and he's going to talk about our new, the region's new official plan. David, welcome. And Doug Curry. Doug. Don't know his name.
Good evening, Mayor,
Jug
councillors, staff and residents. My name is Doug Giles. I'm the Director of Community and Long Range Planning at the region. I'm here with my colleague Dave Hayworth, who is the official plan consultant. And tonight we're here to talk to you about the preparation of the new regional official plan and give you a bit of an overview of that. I'm just here to present a bit of context in terms of why we're producing the new regional official plan. The first regional official plan was adopted in 1973, and since its adoption, it's only had updates to the various sections of the regional official plan. There hasn't been one comprehensive review of the plan in its entirety. So what we're here tonight to talk to you about is the preparation of a new regional official plan, and the reason we're doing it is because, of course, since it was originally adopted, there's been the development patterns, the land use patterns, the growth patterns in the region have changed. There's a lot of significant changes to policy recently, particularly at a provincial level. So we're going to present what we're going to do in terms of establishing a more up-to-date, sort of modern regional official plan that recognizes the changes that have been occurring in the Niagara region. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dave, who will get into a bit more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, council members, staff, and the public. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight and our municipal partners. We've formed some preliminary objectives for the new official plan, and we want to promote and achieve great development outcomes and complete community solutions and an authentic urban experience. We want to facilitate opportunities for economic growth, protect regional, natural, and agricultural resources and adequately respond to the challenges of climate change, provide clear policy direction where necessary and discretion where appropriate, address provincial requirements, regional mandate matters, and provide guidance to the local area municipalities. And the new official plan will be processed under Section 26 of the Planning Act. The process started in a sense in November 2016 with Regional Council agreeing to provide resources for the project over the next 5 years. We'll be having a special meeting of Council July 5th to hear how the public visions Niagara growing and developing to 2041. And in the meantime, the region, with the input of area planners, has been framing required priority background studies to inform the new official plan. So you've heard a lot about, in the past, about the Municipal Comprehensive Review, which was mainly directed at growth management and where and how Niagara will grow. So under the new growth plan, the provincial growth plan, the Municipal Comprehensive View is much more than that. It's the growth management part, but it also is the natural heritage and other resources and all the other parts of the official plan. So really, it's the new official plan. It's all been kind of enveloped into the official plan. So our general high-level process for background studies, as an example, is the collection of background, and there'll be input after the collection of background, public stakeholder input, etc. Development of options, again, input. Development of recommendations, again, input, stakeholder, public, area planners, etc. And then the development of policy, and at the policy stage, again, there will be that input provided. We've also, I should say, formulated a planning advisory committee of residents in Niagara. There's 8 members that will be providing input into the process in terms of background studies as well. So our priority background studies, we have 4 studies under growth management that you can see here, and 4 background studies going on with respect to natural systems and resources. And the reason it's shown as a puzzle is because everything is interrelated, and one policy section impacts another, and the province really wants the new official plans done in a comprehensive manner. So under the growth management pieces of the puzzle, we have the land budget or land needs assessment, employment land strategy, urban structure, and housing strategy. And they're all interconnected, and in fact, the urban structure, housing strategy, and employment land strategy informs the land needs assessment. For the land needs assessment, it's going to determine the amount of developable urban land needed for residential and employment purposes to 2041, identify excess lands. It's based on guidance from the province on how to do land needs assessment. We will be looking at alternative greenfield density targets to the required 80 people and jobs per hectare, because we feel that is somewhat high and not reflective of what probably Niagara should have. The new regional official plan does allow an opportunity to rationalize urban boundaries and ensure that sufficient lands are in the proper location to accommodate growth. But urban boundary expansions can only take place if there isn't enough land, or if there are excess lands, it can take place to rationalize boundaries, but it will require the de-designation of excess lands within the region. For employment land strategy, we want to ensure sufficient and marketable supply for traditional industrial development, identify regional employment areas that are significant. We're currently working with local municipalities, specifically area planners at this stage, and will be informed by the region's annual employment inventory. And with the confirmation of employment areas, a market assessment will be undertaken to analyze the viability of the identified employment areas, because we want to protect important employment areas for the long term, and that's required by the province. In terms of urban structure, this is a significant component to achieve an eventual 60% intensification rate under the growth plan across the region. We want to identify a hierarchy of settlement areas and identify intensification nodes within settlement areas across the region and assign population and density accordingly. And these are important because they provide areas where we want to focus intensification to take advantage of public transportation, etc. And it also helps by applying intensification in those areas, it helps protect established neighborhoods as well. So this is a very preliminary urban structure outline, but we're looking at downtown St. Catharines, urban growth center, downtown Niagara Falls and Welland emerging urban centers, the major GO transit station areas that you've probably heard of, where the secondary plans have been planned around the GO transit areas, other regional growth areas, which can be like district plans, like the Brock district plan that was completed a bit, and now we're looking at the Glendale district plan area around the outlet mall and that area, and Niagara College, etc., White Oaks. And then the establishment looking at intensification along key regional corridors that connect urban centers, and then of course there can also be local centers and local corridors that the local municipalities want to identify. In terms of a housing strategy, we want to promote an appropriate range and mix of housing forms, age in place, opportunities and choice, set affordable ownership and rental housing targets, identify tools to support affordable housing, align with the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan, and support complete communities. And these are all basically provincial requirements. So that's our growth management portion, which is key. We also have the Rural and Natural Systems Management Program that we're working on. So we're working on background studies related to agriculture, natural environment, aggregates, and climate change. And climate change is shown related to those three, but it also relates to growth management as well, and you'll see that later. In terms of the agricultural framework, we want to recognize agriculture as a primary driver of the regional economy. We want to protect the unique land, update specific policies such as agriculture-related and on-farm diversified uses, and we want to ensure conformity and supportive policies for the agriculture economy and industry. And what we heard, so what we've been doing when we frame, when we complete the frameworks that we've brought forward to regional council, we've discussed the frameworks with area planners, planning directors for the various municipalities, et cetera. And what we heard generally with respect to the agriculture is there was concerns regarding viability of certain agricultural lands, discussions regarding refinements to provinces. Sorry.
I'll give you a few minutes to wrap up.
Okay,
Continue.
I'll go as quick as I can. Discussions regarding refinements to the province's agricultural system, concerns on how wineries are addressed, importance of agricultural impact assessment, importance of compatibility, and concerns about use of greenhouses for cannabis. In terms of the natural environment, I'll go quickly. Watershed planning is crucial. The accurate mapping and appropriate methods to identify significant natural resources is critical. Water systems and how to assess natural heritage and development of a watershed planning policy. And what we heard at the meetings, the mapping, a very important issue, how accurate it is, the interconnectedness with watershed planning, range of concerns related to woodlands, specific topics, offsetting shorelines, watercourse mapping, education being a key component. Aggregate resources, just quickly, that was started under Imagine Niagara. It was basically not 90% complete. The province changed its requirements. We went through an addendum to update that, and that has been approved by Regional Council, so we'll be developing policies related to agriculture, aggregates next. In terms of climate change, we want opportunities for climate change adaptation and mitigation and provide guidance and a climate change study to assess the obligations and options related to greenhouse gas emission targets. This slide basically shows all the areas that are impacted and that climate change impacts and the interrelationships of them: transportation, infrastructure, waste, natural hazards, energies. So those are all elements we have to look at for climate change. Engagement process, we want to engage the Indigenous First Nations people early, carry forward essential information and direction, clear understanding that one policy decision impacts another, opportunities for council members to feel involved, consideration and identification of the regional mandate, broad-based and personal consultation, and provide strategic facilitation where necessary. Moving forward, we want to comply with the Planning Act requirements, special council meetings, but we're going way beyond that. As you can see, our public involvement in the background studies. Provide broad-based consultation, present to local councils periodically at key stages to keep you informed. We're using all the input gathered through Imagine Niagara, which was just a few years ago, which was a tremendous amount of input, which we still feel is quite relevant to help guide us. And we want to complete the regional official plan in sections and bring it as one package for endorsement.
I'm going to ask you to hold on a minute. I'm going to ask council to, if they want to vote to continue to see the entire slide deck. Can I get a
I'm done.
Almost done anyway. It's finished.
Oh, questions, it's over.
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, that solves the problem. Are there any questions for our presenters? Councillor Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I was going through this before the meeting, I looked at a couple of things, and these are only a couple of things that I was concerned about. We talk about climate change, for example, and you said it's all intertwined, they're interconnected, and you show what's going to happen in the urban area, but climate change is over here related to the agricultural field and the rural area more than ever, where climate change really belongs, dealing with all of it. And that graphic indicated to me that if that's the way the plan is going to be looked at, then we're missing a big issue. Because there are several things, I'm supposed to be asking you a question. So my question is this: how are you going to put climate change into the entire concept of what this plan is bringing forward?
Through your worship to the councillor, there was a few different slides. One slide showed all 8 background studies as different pieces of the puzzle that all connected. So we recognize that comprehensiveness of everything. I mentioned when the climate change was under the natural environment that it also related to growth management and then the slide that had climate change in the middle with all the other components, transportation, waste management, et cetera, complete communities filtering in. That's how we're going to really be looking at it. The whole growth plan, the province's growth plan, is related to climate change. All of it is related to climate change and reducing impacts of climate change. And through the new official plan, all those types of policies relate to climate change indirectly, some more indirectly than others, but they'll all be there, and then there'll probably be a separate section that pulls it together.
I have a few more questions, but I'll just ask one more. We talk about traditional employment areas and making sure that there's enough space for traditional employment areas. What about the new employment areas? There's a different type of employer out there in this world we have right now. It's not industry that drives everything anymore. There are a lot of other things. And that seemed to be missing as well when I looked at that.
Through your worship to the councillor, what we have to do in terms of the land needs assessment is make sure there's sufficient lands, employment areas, but also which are kind of the key traditional industrial lands, but also that there's sufficient lands for employment in general. And we recognize the changing economy, and there's more people working from home and that type of thing, and that all has to be filtered in from the beginning. So obviously it's a PowerPoint presentation. We're focusing on some kind of key elements. The provincial requirement is that we have to identify and protect employment areas, but we also will be looking at employment in general, and that's why I mentioned that it's going to be informed by our employment inventory as well.
Thank you. I look forward to the document when it comes out.
Thank you.
Councillor Pion?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious, in general, of course, when you plan long-term urban planning, one of the biggest factors that comes into it is transportation. With the rapid development of driverless vehicles, there's predictions of different landscape as far as transportation. Has that made its way into long-term urban planning yet? Or is it starting to?
Well, I would say at this stage it hasn't. But when we begin to look at climate change and do all the background work, I mean, those are types of elements that will obviously be inputted in and be considered in some context to some degree. But keep in mind the planning horizon is to 2041, but once it's approved, it can be updated every 10 years as well.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Jean D'Amelio Swire, resident, and she's going to talk about parking restrictions on Honey Locust Circle.
It's a two-part presentation.
Okay,
Hello,
you're
my
sharing
name
the
is
time there?
Sergio Sarter.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Hello, Mayor, City Councilors, and City staff. My name is Sergio Sarter, and my family and I reside at 55 Honey Locust Circle in Thorold. I would like to thank you for allowing me to address you today to talk about the parking restrictions and excluding Honey Locust Circle from the no parking pilot per bylaw 53/2018 passed by Council on May 15th, 2018. You should have received a petition that I have signed by most of the residents of our street, and I also have a number of residents here in support of me. I will note that the ones that didn't sign the petition were not home when I tried to gather the signatures. I also was made aware that recently there was a public forum where the residents were convened for some of the streets of the pilot to discuss the no parking restrictions, but Honey Locust Circle was not invited to that public forum. We abruptly and without prior warning received notice in our mailboxes of the pilot, and some of the no parking signs have already been installed. I don't understand how this could happen, that there is a public forum, but yet we're not invited, but part of the pilot. I also don't see a reason why our street is even in the pilot. On many levels, I feel this is really a rush job and poor planning, and the residents of Honey Locust Circle are requesting to be removed from this pilot. We are a self-contained street with 2 separate entrances with only single-dwelling homes, where residents, for the most part, park in their driveways with their personal vehicles. A pilot should be done where the problem areas are. Honey Locust Circle does not fit the pilot, as there really is no problems with parking to date. I also measured from my street, my curb, to the opposite curb, which is on the corner of the crescent, and it's 14.8 meters, nearly double the size of the pilot. I also measured at the narrowest part of the street, which is in front of Jean D'Amelio Swire's house, and it's 8.7 meters, nearly 1 meter above the pilot. I really questioned, did anyone bother to get out a tape measure before they included us in the pilot? Our street has no other signage, and I really see where all the signs are marked. There's a lot of signage for a small street. There's even signage in front of a fire hydrant where there's already bylaws against parking in front of a fire hydrant. We lost all of our trees last year, and now all of these signs are a lot of signage for a small street. I was also told that there's a liability issue, and I don't agree that there is a liability issue. If there was truly a liability issue, there would be no need for a pilot. I do recognize that some of the streets do have parking problems, and those are in high density or problems, especially where streets have through access to another street. And such signage is appropriate in those places. But that's not our street. Our street is a crescent that is not a through street. Thank you for allowing me to address you. I'll now pass it over to Jean D'Amelio Swire, who has some other points.
Thank you, Mr. Sartor.
Mayor, City Councilor, City Staff, good evening. My name is Jean D'Amelio Swire, and I reside at 32 Honey Locust. Honey Locust is not a circle, it is a crescent in the shape of a C, and has 2 access points from Raspberry Trail. It is not an access or through street to any other street in the subdivision. It is a self-contained street generally accessed by residents, friends, and family. It is one of the more established streets in the West community, low-density, single-family dwellings ranging from 14 to 20 years approximately, which we've had no issues. The Crescent has 7 homes on the east side, with only 5 of the 7 homes have frontages for parking. And this is the side, that that all the other side is going to park on. Okay, I'm going to start over again. I apologize. The Crescent has 7 homes on the east side, of which only 5 homes have frontages for parking, while the west side, where the no parking signs are being proposed, has 19 homes. No parking signs would result in the side of the street with the most homes parking on the side of the street with the least parking spaces. The east side with the 7 homes all have driveways that accommodate 4 cars to 6 cars, while the west side, the driveways are where the sidewalks are located and can only accommodate 2 vehicles and more often require on-street parking periodically. The east side, which is less often requires on-street parking than the west side, will now have cars constantly parked in front of the 5 residential available parking spaces. A good pilot project has a rationale for choosing specific elements for the pilot, which might include chronic and or demonstrated issues, prevention of access to other streets, high-density housing, and other extenuating factors like a nearby sports facility. I do not see any clear objectives and or measurements for the evaluation in the pilot. After speaking to engineer, I was told that approximately 40% of the streets throughout Thorold are 7.8 meters. Why was only the west community targeted for this pilot? As this width applies to 40% of the streets throughout Thorold. Why are new subdivisions being built with streets that are 7.8 meters if this is a concern to the fire department? Why hasn't this issue come up before in the more established streets of Thorold, which are old established streets? What has changed? As Sergio has already commented, Honey Locust is wider than 7.8 meters, and I believe that staff has recently verified this by remeasuring the street. Therefore, on behalf of the residents of Honey Locust, we are respectfully requesting the following. The residents of Honey Locust Circle request Council to remove Honey Locust Circle from the list of streets named in bylaw 53-2018, and I quote, to restrict parking on various streets narrower than 7.8 meters in the Confederation West community, as noted in the notification to the residents. Honey Locust does not fall within this criteria, as our street is wider than 7.8 meters, and in some parts the street is almost double to 14.8 meters. Our second request is that the no parking signs recently be installed on Honey Locust be removed. Our third request is that a public meeting of residents of Honey Locust Circle be convened should council continue with including Honey Locust in this pilot. And we are hoping that you will remove us from the pilot because we don't meet the criteria. And the last request is that we, the residents of Honey Locust, are requesting a recorded voter votes on any matter related to Honey Locust and the no parking sign issue. I would like to thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council and staff for your attention and consideration of the information presented to you this evening, and your support to remove Honey Locust Circle from the list of streets per bylaw 53-2018.
Thank you, Mr. Emilio Swire. Can you please stay there in case of questions? Are there any questions? Councillor Ugolini, Councillor Whalen. Go ahead, Terry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. My question's for the Director of Public Works and Community Services regarding the 7.8 measurement, and if in fact that street is greater than 7.8, why is it part of the pilot project?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is the engineering staff have gone back out. My understanding was a difference of about 11 centimeters difference, and the measurement was 7.91 meters. So engineering staff are reviewing this number and also have convened with the fire department just to determine whether that small difference was going to make any difference in terms of whether it's going to be restricted parking or not. And in discussions with the fire department, that minor difference that was measured didn't make a difference from the fire department's perspective, so the existing parking restriction would be maintained. Now, that being said, this is new information that I'm hearing tonight in relation to those widths of being far greater than 7.91. And again, this is from what I was told by engineering staff. So what I can advise is that we'll look at this. Certainly, if there's areas that are significantly wider, then those areas really don't warrant a parking restriction.
Go ahead.
So we should wait until you do those, and you'll come back to council with the report. Is that what you're recommending?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. to the councillor, that's what I would recommend. I think there is probably some minor differences and variations that have been identified clearly on honey locust, and we'll have a good hard look at that. And what we can do is bring back a report specifically for honey locust and identify specifically if there's any modifications that we deem need to be changed, and that's in consultation with the fire department, of course.
And also, the other concern that really does bother me is that they weren't part of the original consultation process, and they weren't allowed to have any input. So I really think that maybe something we should look at is just look at the original streets that we looked at as part of the pilot, and those streets that did give feedback at that time.
And again, through you, Mr. Mayor, the process that was followed was essentially there was a decision that was made as a result of a safety matter that was identified, and the pilot area study was really trying to focus an area of the city where we can look at how things are going to work out and incorporate the results of that information into the transportation master plan and then roll that out across the city. So obviously with limitations on both staffing and financial resources, we have to focus on one area of the city. And because a number of these streets are already reviewed, this is an area why the pilot study was focused there. Now, the communication was as a result of a decision. There wasn't the opportunity because of the safety issue to really provide input because of the safety matter. So the communication that went out was communication through social, through web. There was a hand delivery, and there was also a notice posted in the paper. Now, my understanding as part of the pilot process, there will be consultation with the entire community. So there'll be opportunities for everybody to provide input on what's working, what's not, and that's really part of the whole process of getting feedback from the community, getting some metrics to put in place, and getting an assessment of, based on those metrics, what's working, what's not, and how we can refine things both in this pilot project area and across the city.
Councillor Whalen?
Thanks, Ted. Surgeon Jean, thanks you for your presentation. You mentioned also you had a petition. Did you present that to staff yet or no?
I have it here with me.
So maybe pass that forward to our Director of Public Works so we have that on file.
Excuse me, Councillor. The clerk has something.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the petition is included in your council package this evening. It's under City Clerk's report where we put all of our correspondence.
Sounds good. And I would imagine also that our fire chief's report will come forward with the staff report with the safety measures also?
Through the mayor, that's correct. So we'll incorporate the fire department's information and recommendations in the same report.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Payon.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. When this whole process started, one of the main reasons that was brought up for doing limiting parking is because of complaints from people about parking on their street. Has there ever been anyone on your crescent that has complained or had trouble with parking issues?
Not that I am aware of. Generally on our street, the people that park on that street occasionally live on that street, and there's no reason for anyone that doesn't live on that street to park there. So there has never been any parking problems on our street.
Okay. The reason I asked is because I agree with you. I don't think this should be part of the pilot, but there have been issues with some streets where someone had a specific need and had trouble, for example, with wheelchair access and things like that. That's the only reason I asked, but failing that, I agree. I don't see why this is in the pilot project either.
I would just like to add one thing. Putting no parking signs on the west side will completely create problems for us. As I said, we have 19 houses that use the on-street parking periodically when family and friends come because they have 2 in their driveways. And there's only, so those 19 houses, if you put the signs up, have to park in front of 5 houses on the other side of the street. So where there is no parking problem, there will be.
Thank you. Thanks again for your presentation.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming here tonight and for that presentation.
we'll be informed of any reports or the outcome.
You will be.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to motions for support. City of Thorold, moved by Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself, second by Councillor Ugolini, whereas the clerk's office was notified of one vacancy on the Lake Gibson Preservation Task Force, and whereas on January 11, 2018, a notice was placed in Niagara this week and on the City of Thorold website seeking appointments to the board, and whereas one application was received and it was recommended by the Committee of Council to review applications to boards and committees on May 1st, 2018 for approval by Thorold City Council. Now therefore it be resolved that Michael Schofield be hereby appointed to the Lake Gibson Preservation Task Force until November 30th, 2018. And number two, that the chair of the Lake Gibson Preservation Task Force be so advised.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Are there any speakers to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Township of Wainfleet, moved by Councillor Ugolini.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Neal, that the correspondence received from the Township of Wainfleet from its council meeting of May 8th, 2018, encouraging the Regional Municipality of Niagara and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority to acquire the remaining Lakewood Beach property for the purpose of improving public access to the Lake Erie shoreline and for enhancing opportunities for the public to experience the lakefront in meaningful ways, be received and supported.
Speakers to the motion. I'm going to have trouble with the supported part. This is a huge amount of money right now, and it's being debated at the region. It's a regional issue. So I'm going to ask that we file it if the mover will accept that. Thank you very much. Then the motion is moved to file. Any speakers on that? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. What's that? Oh, where's?
It's not on your list because it's too late.
Okay, I have a motion by Councillor Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Neal. Whereas the city clerk's office was notified of an event being held on June 29, 2018, and that shall set up only as well as June 30th, 2018, and July 1st, 2018 from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. by the Laku Knock at the Lake Club Niagara property at 13030 Lundy's Lane. Whereas the event has been going for the last 73 years by the St. George Serbian Orthodox Church located on Mount Rose in Niagara Falls. Whereas the location of the event was changed due to the construction of the church. Whereas the Laku Knock is now seeking support from council to obtain special occasion permit from the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. And therefore, it be resolved. The council declares this event as a municipally significant event for the purpose of obtaining a special occasion permit from AGCO.
Speakers to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. We're into statements by councillors. You have a list for me right there. Okay, I have Councillor Ugolini on grass cutting complaints.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I want to make comment on, I'm sure every councillor here has got numerous calls on grass cutting complaints. So I want to raise this awareness, especially in areas of absentee landlords. And I think we have to be a little more proactive and not wait for one of us to get a complaint or not wait for a resident to have to make a phone call. What I'm asking for is that we do patrols and we see these incidences, that we cite them. I think it's something we owe the residents. We have residents in these neighborhoods looking after their properties, and they shouldn't have to put up with this. And we really have to make a statement and really go hard on this. So what I'm asking is that we make it a priority with our bylaw department.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hanley, you're going to talk to us about McAdam Park.
Yes, thank you. I know I was going to talk about the property standards, but Councillor Ugalini is handling that, and we do have an issue. Just if I could just comment, 75 complaints. I know last week alone, not talking to our CO, that we received, so I know we're inundated with this type of complaint, and glad to see we're trying to do the best it is. McAdam Park, yes, fine. It's been 2 long years, but I believe after, in the next couple of days, we received the mirrors yesterday. Just have to install the mirrors. The washroom facilities all painted. All the plumbing's been done. Separation barriers within. We were there last weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're there again this weekend. So glad to say this weekend I would imagine that the splash pad will be able to have a washroom facility there that's been completely done over. And if I just could mention quickly, I'm just going to go from the ground up. Vince Perry, he dug us the excavation so we could do the footings. Modern Mosaic donated the concrete and that so that we could pour the footings with. And then myself, and from monies that we got from the Ontario Paper Foundation through Donnie Hartle and from Ken Salvage, we were able to buy the blocks to get the foundation built. Then we got 7 meters of concrete donated from Lafarge Concrete, and with the help of City of Thorold employees, Shad Wogan, Louis Sabatini, and Dave at the cemetery, they helped me do the 7 meters of concrete to finish the concrete off. Former City Councilor Mike Murphy done all the plumbing for us for free. I got all the plumbing material for free from Modern Niagara Plumbing Services. I got the trusses for free from Rolling Meadows Land Corporation. I got the plywood from the Canadian Corps. They donated all the money for the plywood. I got the roofing material from Hamlet's Roofing. Then 2 roofers, Jimmy Duff and his brother, done the roofing for me. I got help from my son, Dave Mahaychuk, John Doherty. Then Rob DiVenetto Roofing went. They done the soffit, the fascia, and the eave troughs. Tom Chorney, Thorold South resident, he's been doing all the painting. He painted the doors, painted all the washrooms. Jensen Plumbing done plumbing for us, donated and cost us materials. Pete Mahaychuk, Billy Mahaychuk as mentioned, they done all the block work. Dickie Burke helped out too. Modern Niagara Block, they donated 50% of the material that we did there. I paid for half, they give me the other half for free. Touchstone Landscape, they give me the stone that we could use for the footings and everything to do the footings. So we're looking at having it open this weekend. I was going to have something on the 30th of June, but then realizing, since Councilor Ugalini reminded me I had to volunteer for the Blues in the Battlefield deal, I forgot I was involved in there. So we're looking the middle of July maybe, and I'm going to have a little recognition out there at the park and some signage put up and that stuff to recognize everybody. And then I got to thank Curtis, George, and Steve Santos from the city went by there, done the landscaping for me this week. So we're up and running. We're going to get the mirrors in and a couple of soap dispensers. It's all fully handicap accessible. All the grab bars have been installed. Brand new, ready to go washroom facility for everybody to use out in Thorold South. And with the new washroom hours, 8 in the morning till 8 at night, it'll get used very well. And I just hope that for all the work that everybody's put into it, it's respected by the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanley. There's another one here. We've already talked about the clean yards and response or lack of it.
Yeah, I talked to the CAO earlier and that stuff. You know, and if I just comment on it quickly, I understand where Councilor Ugalini is coming from. I honestly believe we need to change the bylaw currently, how it stands. That's for another day, but, you know, if we go and post a notice on the person's door, they get 2 days. But if we do it through the mail, it's 8 days. But my problem with this here is the repeat offenders just drive around town year in, year out for decades. I think that's where the bylaw needs to be changed and addressed. We don't need to be chasing these people every year. And I think what we need to do is, I know that the city employees, we don't have the time to do it ourselves. I'm thinking we should be looking at was like we contract out tree cutting, that we should be looking for a landscape company that we could put on a retainer. And here you go, and have them immediately dispatched. So when we put those 48-hour notices up 2 days, we notify the company we have on retainer. We don't have to go by again. They got the address. They go by if the grass isn't cut, start cutting, and send us the bill, and we'll put it on the person's taxes like we do. I think there's a real simple solution to it. It needs working, and instead of presenting it here and doing a motion, I think just talking with Public Works and the individuals we have at the city now, we can resolve this without even bringing a motion to council.
Good.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Longo, and he'll be talking about parking situation on Honey Locust.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't ask any questions of the presenters because I spoke to most of them during the last few weeks because for full disclosure, I do live on Honey Locust Circle. A few weeks ago when this issue came up regarding parking on Honey Locust Circle, I did ask a few questions at council. I knew this was going to create issues because I knew there was no consultation with the people of Honey Locust Circle or many other streets where this pilot project is taking place. The original intention of this parking issue we have is for the newer high-density streets. That's what we were aware of councillors that staff was addressing. They had public meetings for the 4 streets off of Winterberry where there are chronic parking problems. We as councillors assumed that that's where staff's direction would go, but it was broadened to do a pilot project. Presumably because of an issue with fire trucks. And if there are issues with fire trucks going down the streets and there are liability concerns, then I am all for looking at this as a pilot project. But at this point, I believe, mainly because there was no public consultation, I think we need to do a few things, and I'd like to put forward a motion tonight that we suspend the pilot project as it's written now, because there are flaws with the pilot project. I've had engineering out to Honey Locust Circle. I held one end of the tape measure. There is an issue. There's a measurement issue. Whether it was a clerical error or a mistake, we have to get that resolved. So I believe we need to suspend the pilot project as it's written right now because it is flawed. I also believe if we're going to include it on streets such as Honey Locust, Tulip Tree, Sugar Maple, then we need to have public consultation and a public meeting to allow those people to give input, ideas, and possible solutions if it is required. Then I would like staff to review the outcomes of those meetings and then report back to council. Give council a full report, more detailed than last time, obviously, and more accurate. And at that point, council can make a decision. Again, if there's a liability issue, we'll deal with it then. We'll talk to the fire chief. We'll talk to the building department because I'm being told that there are requirements in either the building code or fire code that we may have to look at and address. But council needs more information, and I'm asking that council support these points and we can move forward from there.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. Okay, we need a motion to waive the procedural bylaw rules. Councillor Hanley.
I'll put a motion forward to waive the procedural bylaws.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now you can put your motion forward.
Okay, my motion would be to suspend the newly adopted pilot project bylaw and to have public meetings with all streets involved in any pilot project, and for staff to come back with a report and review of those meetings and a recommendation.
Okay, that's the motion on the floor. Speakers to the motion. Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice. We just got to do notice of motion. Are there any notice of motions? Seeing none, we're going into general committee. I'm going to call for a 5-minute break. And we'll come back.
I think I'm gonna have a problem with my policy to appoint council boards and committees. Do you think it'll be a problem or no?
Say that again.
My appointment by our policy
Thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest? Seeing none, I'll move on. We have no delegations. I'll call for the reports to be brought forward from consent. Had a motion to move those reports forward. Councillor Pion.
So moved, and I'd like to call one out.
Would you like to pull, which one do you like to pull?
PWCS 2018-21, the removal of the railroad tracks.
Railway tracks, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, my question isn't specifically about the tracks. It's great to see that that's happening. But as was mentioned in the report, this gives an opportunity to do something about the safety issue with traffic handling for Prince of Wales School. And I'm pleased to see that of the three options given, where one is the status quo, we're going with option A, which is to move the crosswalk to a better spot, curb bump outs, and pedestrian crossover signs. That's great. It's a big progress. I'm just wondering why we didn't go further and put flashing 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit for this area, or are we doing that? My understanding is that Thorold, Prince of Wales is the only school in Thorold that doesn't have those 40-kilometer-an-hour flashing lights during school time. So why aren't we taking this opportunity to put that in as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they aren't the only school in the city that doesn't have them. I believe the only one who does actually is Richmond Street, and then I guess the one over on Collier Road as well.
Okay.
We have we chose the more stringent of the traffic controls with the actual signalized lights over top of the road out there. We did that because we thought it's a more significant traffic safety issue than some of the other locations we have. So we believe this is actually a more safe situation.
Okay, just a follow-up then, through you, Mr. Mayor. I understand that curb bump outs and all these other things will slow down traffic. I guess the idea behind flashing 40-kilometer-an-hour signs is that at 40 kilometers an hour it's safer. So will there be any follow-up to see that after these measures are in place, traffic really will slow down? And if not, then maybe we can consider the flashing 40-kilometer-an-hour signs?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as a matter of fact, the Region Run program that started this ball in motion absolutely includes a follow-up and a discussion with the residents in the area.
Because you're right. I mean, if this is a lot of improvement, and if it slows down traffic to around 40, then why do you need the signs to say go 40? But I just want to make sure there's some way of checking that so that if we don't succeed in slowing it down, maybe we can consider that. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Whalen on the same item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Another question further. It's great to see this coming for the sake of the safety at Prince of Wales School. Was there any thought given the intersection of Sullivan and Pine also? That's a crazy intersection. I can't tell you how many times I've almost been run over there going through that intersection. And it's probably one of the most dangerous intersections within the city. Is there any thought of going further along that towards the intersection, and that would help with the calming at the same time?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, are you asking for traffic signals at that intersection?
Something, I say, that would help, and then it would slow down the whole intersection going further along Pine towards the school.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple of years ago, we did some traffic counting and some warrant analysis on that intersection. Although we don't believe that signals are warranted or were warranted when we did the study back then, as George referred to earlier, we're doing a transportation master plan, and it's going to identify that as one of the intersections to look at in specific safety details.
Which are great, and say maybe with the addition of these 40 speed limit signs, like Councillor Pion said, that might help it also, because people think they got seasons pass to go through that intersection for some stupid reason. But so whatever you do would be appreciated. That for sure.
Councillor Longo. Okay, we're done with that item, I guess. Okay, which item would you like pulled?
CC 2018-29. It's a stop up and close road allowance located at Welland Street North. I just have a question on this to staff. I don't know who can answer it. We are considering selling that portion of land. What's the reason for doing this stop up and close now? Is it something that can be reversed easily if we don't sell it? I'm just confused at the haste to do this when we haven't even decided if we're going to sell it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the reason we have to stop up and close is part of the sale process. We have to declare this road allowance surplus in order to proceed to get bids to purchase. So it's part of it. And it can be reversed if council chooses not to.
Okay, so it says here that all costs associated with closing and conveyance. So if we close it and then reopen it, are we stuck with all the costs to do this? And are these big costs or not?
They're nominal costs.
Okay. But it has to be done in order to proceed the way we want.
Exactly.
Are there any other items to be pulled? Seeing none, I'll call a question on all the consent items. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We're moving to the discussion reports. Can I get a motion to move, which one is it? PDS 2018-14. Can I have a motion to move that forward? Councillor Whalen. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. PDS 2018-14, recommendation report regarding a zoning bylaw amendment for 184 Kiefer Road. D14-01-2018. And is that you? Go ahead, Mr. Darbyson.
Thank you very much. The recommendations are as follows. That the Director of Planning and Development Services report PDS 2018-14 be approved as presented. That General Committee support the zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject land from residential first density R1B zone to a site-specific second density R2 zone. That the zoning bylaw amendment be presented to Council for approval at this evening's Council meeting, and that zoning bylaw amendment be approved by Council. That concludes the report.
Can I get a mover for the report? Councillor Hanley. Speakers to the report. Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's good because we had a meeting with the development community the other day and talking about options on affordable housing and different types of housing in a community. And this is one of the options that we discussed, and it's a great option to have more people on that particular piece of property, but in a very age-friendly manner.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Are there any other speakers? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I'll go back to the top of the discussion reports. DF 2018-17. Who's speaking on that? Oh, Ms. Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation that effective January 1st, 2019, as a result of the federal government's decision to eliminate the municipal officer's 1/3 tax-free exemption, that the mayor and council compensation be grossed up such that there is no impact to their net take-home pay. And this concludes the report.
Thank you, Ms. Morrow. Can I get a mover for the report? Councillor Longo. So move the report. Speakers, Councillor Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a little concern. I appreciate what Ms. Morrow is getting at with this report, but we've asked for a review of council's wages for many years now, and we've never got a report back. So I feel that we should push this forward to the next council, have them do a review of total salaries, comparisons to other municipalities. If they do seem the necessity to put this in, to do it at that time. It's only putting a Band-Aid on what needs to be done for the payment of this council.
Councillor Pion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since it's not explicitly, it wasn't mentioned when it was read, I just want to emphasize that it is for the next council. The effective date of this is January 1st, 2019. So these changes don't take place for this council. It's for the next council. That I just want to make that clear to anybody who missed the date part.
Councillor Sharon.
The reality is that really this council should do this if it's going to happen. The next council, they'll sit there and say, oh, gee whiz, we can't actually vote for this because it'll look like we're taking the city for our extra money, and we don't want to do that. The reality is simply we're not giving them any more money. We're just compensating for the fact that somebody else is taking that tax relief away. And I think there's no one here sitting in the council chamber who is making an enormous amount of money off of doing this. You're doing it as much because you wish to work with your community. And as a person who's not running, I can say that without any interest whatsoever for those who are, that it is reasonable to do this and reasonable to do it now and not wait and put the onus on the people who are elected for the next term of council.
Are there any other speakers? I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Where am I? Let's see. PWC 2018-14 Corporate Space Planning. It's Mr. Stojanovic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendations of the report are that council authorize staff to utilize funds from the Building Renovations Staffing Accommodation Project to fund a project management office consultant to develop a design-build request for proposal and oversee design and construction activities for municipal office renovations required on the second floor of 8 Carlton Street to accommodate corporate staffing needs. So concludes the report.
Thank you. Can I get a mover for the report? Councillor Ugolini. Are there any speakers to the report? Councillor Ugolini.
I'm happy to see we're doing this. I pushed for this. The first year we were elected in council and we went out and reviewed all of our assets, I said, why aren't we utilizing the upstairs with staffing? And now this is going to give us the opportunity to utilize it while we do renovations to our operations center, as well as look at future needs. So I think it's a great report, and I want to thank you for a job well done, and I support it 100%.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Neal.
Yes, I agree, and I just want maybe question through you, Mr. Mayor, is that when you're designing and putting the cubicles or offices in place upstairs, are you going to do it so that once you move back into our future operations department, that it can be utilized by other parties other than the type of operations that you're going to put in right now?
Through the mayor to the councillor, there will be a couple of offices, which would be director level offices, but the remainder and the majority of the space is really going to be cubicle type office spacing. So there's going to be a lot of flexibility in terms of what we can do, what council can certainly look forward to doing in the future, given the fact there's going to be a lot of options for adjusting that space going forward.
Councillor Sharon.
I'm just sort of looking at this whole idea of doing it. I think it's a very good way of using the space and making it possible for people to work in a reasonable location while the renovations are taking place. Long term, however, are there any plans in this process that would come up with an idea of when the new building is finished, or the building is renovated, and people move back to where they will be, that this area, there's a plan for how this area might be used, and whether or not it is put out to the community and or out to other people to want to come into it, or do we believe that the government itself is getting large enough that we need more space to be able to do it, and therefore this could be a possibility?
So through the mayor to the councillor, what we've done is corporately look at what the staffing forecast is across the corporation, and we've gathered those numbers, and really once we look at that 10-year plus or minus a year or two, we're looking at full utilization of all of the office spaces that we're going to construct at 8A Carlton. So it really provides the municipality with some breathing room, knowing that the funding that we'd be looking at utilizing here is going to give us, a 10-year window of opportunity to not have to necessarily make any major decisions in terms of a brand new municipal office center that would house all staff. So, and then in addition to that, if a decision was made or if there was funding potentially that came through the federal or provincial governments, there is still some opportunity again to reallocate those staff at A. Carlton to potentially a newer, larger consolidated space if granting opportunities were there. And then again, there's some flexibility of how that space would be utilized going forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Longo.
Just a quick question. Regarding parking at the 8 Carlton Street location, there are no concerns from the senior center?
Through the mayor to the councillor, we've sat down with the operations staff at the senior center. We've also looked at the number of parking spaces, and the results that we have found were that there is sufficient parking space, especially during the day, for the small complement of staff that will be looked at housed at 8 Carlton, given the existing parking. I think, just trying to recall, I think the number was there's plus or minus 60 spaces, so there's quite a few. And then the other component is that there is some opportunity, if need be, to construct some on-site parking just off to the side / front of the building, if need be, if there was at all any type of issue in terms of parking accommodations for staff in consideration of the seniors.
Councillor Ugolini.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say the biggest parking requirement there is the first Thursday of every month when they hold their lunch and monthly meeting, and I'm sure we can work around that.
Councillor Hanley.
Just quick, I'd like to say it's a great report too, George. It's been a long time coming. Myself personally, I know one time I made a presentation where I had the design and actual artist's rendition of building 7 apartments there, and it remained empty for this amount of time. So it's great to see that it's finally being utilized and staff will be utilizing it. And I believe that this could be a long-term facility, not short-term, and that stuff myself personally, and it will help cater to the people's needs of the city instead of having to drive all out to Schmon Parkway all the time. I believe that's what the intention is here too also, so it's great to see it happening finally.
Are there any other speakers? Just one quick comment. This has been a long time coming. I think I've been on it for 6 years. Thank you, staff, very much for bringing it forward. I really appreciate it. I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. PWCS 2018-20 Toronto Marlies exhibition game. Mr. Dre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recommendation is that report PWCS 2018-20 be approved for the purpose of community engagement and economic growth within Thorold, funded as a general budget overrun at an upset limit of $58,000.
Thank you, Mr. Dre. Can I get a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Ugolini. Speakers. Councillor Ugolini.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a great initiative. And I just want to say this is about time we start thinking outside the box and doing things like this. And I really believe that we'll even do better, because 1,450 seat, 1,415 is just seating. And I think it's 1,750 was standing, if I'm not mistaken. So there is an opportunity there to actually the numbers to improve from what you see here. But this is great. I think these are the kind of things that are great for the community, and I hope to see more of these brought forward in the future.
Councilor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have any idea how many, I know Councilor Ugolini sounds like we'll sell this place out, but based on other communities, do we have any idea how many people would spend this kind of money to go to a preseason game? Are we taking a chance here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The Toronto Marlies have done this in other communities over the past few years, and the ticket pricing is approximately what they've charged in other municipalities, and they have been sold out. My belief is that Thorold is starving for an event like this and just engagement, so I believe we're going to be sold out. Yes, there is a risk, but I believe it's minimal.
Councillor Hanley.
As I say, if you don't try, you won't find out. And we've been trying to utilize that arena for years for something other than just hockey. I know we're looking at maybe, we looked at lacrosse before, we looked at basketball, we looked at so many options, and it always came down to a liability issue every time we try to get something done there. So it's great to see that we're going to utilize it in a different way. We've done a substantial amount of work there. They're coming to an A1 facility for its age, built in 74, 75. The $1 million we've done on the washroom facilities and the dressing rooms, what we've done for the boards, the new surface. It's like a new facility, and this can only showcase other individuals, and they come here, and other people may jump on board and say, you know what, maybe we want to hold an event there also. It's in the same venue, maybe not the same type of sport, but just like they never thought they would have a top-notch guy at the Meridian Center, Elton John, come, and now they're going to have John Cougar there. So the same thing, you know, if you make it available for people to use it, people use it. An opportunity may arise, who knows? So I think it's great for the city that we're finally taking an opportunity and a chance at it. All the best.
Are there any other speakers? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. CC 2018-25, proposed sale of city property parts 4, 5, and 6, part of road allowance between lots 67 and 68 RP 59R-15721.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's being recommended that council direct staff to proceed with the process to declare parts 4, 5, and 6 and part of road allowance between lots 67 and 68 on RP 59R-15721, surplus to the city's needs. This is on Uppers Lane, and that a bylaw be presented to council on July 3rd declaring the property surplus. And just to add to Councillor Longo's comment before, this property has already been stopped up and closed back in the early 70s, so that's why we don't have to do it for this one. It's already been taken care of. That concludes the report.
Thank you, Ms. Delvecchio. Can I get a mover for the report? Councillor Whalen.
So move the report.
Speakers to the report. Seeing none, I call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. CC 2018-27, policy number 100-09, volunteer appointments to council boards and committees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's recommended that policy number 100-09, dated June 5th, 2018, by hereby approved by council for implementation with the council term starting 2018 to 2022, that the existing policy remain in force and effect until that time, that a future report be presented to council that will recommend changes to some existing committees and boards. That concludes the report.
Thank you, Ms. Delvecchio. Can I get a mover for the report? Councillor Ugolini.
Report.
Speakers to the report. Seeing none. Oh, sorry.
Just one quick comment. I just want to say we're working on item 3 with the city clerk and Councillor Handley, Councillor Longo, myself, and Deputy Clerk Joanne. And that recommendation will be coming to council. Do we have it? Okay. And what we did is we just went through everything. We looked at all our committees of council and see what was redundant, what needed changes. We'll make recommendations, and then council can decide moving forward.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we did our in-camera. Motions arising from in-camera session? None. Motions to ratify recommendations from General Committee. Moved by Councillor Pion.
Thank Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Sharon, the council adopt those items approved by the General Committee on June 5th, 2018.
Thank you, Councillor Pion. Are there any speakers to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Bylaws, first reading, moved by Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's moved by myself, second by Councillor Ugolini, that leave be given to introduce the following bylaws. Bylaw 58-2018, stop up and close part of road allowance, Welland Street North. Oh, just the numbers, okay. And bylaw 59-2018, bylaw 60-2018, bylaw 61-2018, bylaw 62-2018, bylaw 63-2018, bylaw 64-2018, bylaw 65-2018, and bylaw 66-2018, and that the same now be read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Ugolini, that the bylaws just read a first time, be read a second and a third time, and do pass, and that the mayor and clerk do sign and seal the same. Any rule of this council to the contrary notwithstanding.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Final reading of bylaws, moved by Councillor Neal. Oh, that was, you already said that. Okay, thank you.
I'm finished.
Council committees and board meeting minutes, moved by Councillor Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Payon, that council receive and file the minutes of the committees of council, local boards as presented.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Hanley. That. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thanks to everybody for their efforts tonight.
That was a quick meeting for a lot of reports.
Yeah, I guess we're going to be filled up.